This is my 9th year speaking at the Hackers Congress, and it's such an honor to be here. There's a lot of volunteers and people that contribute to making this event possible. So first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude for all the people and the efforts they put in, for the organization, for the videos, and just everything that's going on. And for those that patiently waited until the last session ended, it wasn't my fault. Though, thank you for your patience, and it's unfortunate that took place, though hopefully the value you will receive from this conversation will make up for your patience. So without further ado, I would like to begin today's presentation on a topic that's been very important for me, and that is holistic anarchy. The reason I have holistic anarchy here is because I often come across individuals who have a fragmented approach to freedom and liberty. Now, what does that mean? It is something that we're going to go over during this presentation so that we can add weight to the concept of holistic anarchy. And from there, perhaps take something of value today that we can implement. So while everything that we're learning here in terms of technology and the evolution of currency turning into something decentralized, proved to be something of great value for a lot of individuals across the world, I believe there's other pieces of the puzzle that are somehow missing in the formula that can equate to a life with a greater sense of liberty and freedom. And that is the purpose of my talk today. And I have many different areas to kind of go over as examples on how we can implement such concepts and paradigms within our daily life. So just a bit about my background. I got involved in cryptos in 2013. I've always been very curious about freedom and being able to take control of certain aspects of my life. And I worked with a lot of different projects as an advisor, as a journalist. And currently I am working on Bitopia University, which is knowledge is currency, which is what I'm working on at the moment to decentralize education. And for me, this is a very important project. It has taken me 10 years of being within the crypto space to come up with this idea and actually implement it and turn it into a reality. And the importance for me is that knowledge has been censored, privatized, and in so many different arenas, inaccessible for the general public. Now, I'm not talking about education in terms of what's available at the university. I'm talking about things that actually impact your life and give you control over certain aspects of your life, not compartmentalize you as the traditional educational system does, so that you don't really have a whole view on what's going on in life. Now, my journey has gone through a lot of different transformations. I started in the Netherlands, which is where I lived for many years. And I was curious how Wim Hof was able to submerge himself in a frozen lake or, in very cold temperatures, survive, swim, and do amazing stuff. Now, this is before it became a thing, which is all around the world. And when I was living in Utrecht, I trained myself and I was able to submerge myself in a frozen lake with a good friend of mine, actually, who joined me for about 7 minutes. And that for me was very transformative because, I don't come from a cold region, as I'm sure you can tell. And for me to be able to do this was an extraordinary superpower because I hated the cold to the point where winter was coming to the Netherlands, I was considering moving away. And I was arguing and being like, well, all animals move when seasons change. And I found all these really creative ideas as to why I shouldn't be there. So instead, I took that fear and I transformed it into a power. And when you do that, you don't just gain the skill to sit in a frozen lake. When you learn a new language, when you overcome a certain aspect of limitation within your own life, it has consequences across all areas of your life. And that's something important to note. When you harness an aspect of your life which is hidden or trapped in fear, it's not just that thing that you're unlocking. It has ramifications for all areas of your life. And that's something important to note. So when you're learning a language, you're not just learning a language. You're training your brain to expand. And that can mean things that you may not be even aware of until much later down the track. I also learned to push my body to be able to do things that I didn't think were possible, thanks to people like Mark Ripto and many other individuals who inspired me to do better. So without having any sort of a meat-based diet, so I chose to go and eat fruits and vegetables and things like that, I was able to deadlift twice my body weight. So at that time, I weighed 65 kilos, and I did 130 kilo deadlift, which I found really powerful, because often you see people with their protein shakes and pre-workout and post-workout. I didn't do any of this. For me, I believed that the human body was capable of doing it without any sort of tools, and thus began my journey down that road. Then I wanted to learn how to do a backflip, and everyone was like, you're a bit too old to learn it. And I was like, we'll see. So then I wanted to implement it, and after a while, I was like, yeah, I can do a backflip. That's cool. Random skills, I know, but all of these were my fears that I explored, and I put a light on it so that I can figure out how to overcome it. It's a scary task at the age of 30-something, trying to flip backwards in the air when you've never done that. When you're young, you've trained, it's very different. At that age, it's challenging, and I was able to do it, and I felt really happy. And it's not something that I can go and kind of implement in my work life, though overcoming that fear for sure had positive impact on other areas of my life. Then I wanted to learn the rings and how to do muscle ups and just play around with that and see how that felt like. And I was able to do that as well. And just for fun, I kept going and seeing what else my body is capable of doing. It's always very interesting, because we come to these events and we externalize things and we say, there's the solution, there's the bad person, there's the person we need to overcome. Oh, it's Russia, no, it's China, it's America. But at the end of the day, maybe perhaps if we started with our own limitations and our own fears, that might be a better place. At least for me, it turned out to be, thanks, mate. At least for me, it turned out to be a very good solution. And perhaps watching this, you can think to yourself, what areas of my life am I hiding from myself? Am I looking for solutions that rather I should be focusing on myself? Maybe. This isn't a formula for anyone's life. This is what's worked for me. And then recently, I wanted to continue that. And I wanted to figure out, okay, how else can I push my body? I learned from the Olympic lifters on how to do, for example, a clean. Again, plant-based diet, no protein shakes. Most of my diet is fruit. Every now and then I eat other stuff too, obviously. And I was able to do it. Again, these are things that people spend a lot of time and resources training and putting supplements in their body to be able to attain and achieve. And there you go, without any sort of, what would I call it? No messing about, no nonsense. Just raw human body being pushed to be able to do things that maybe I thought would not be possible. So that for me was very interesting. What is my aim with doing all of this? My aim is to remove blockages, because blockages will unfortunately lead us to become that water bottle or alcohol bottle in that stagnant water. And that's not good, because when water is not flowing, it becomes stagnant. It means that there has no direction. There's no longer new ideas. There's no longer a new perspective. It is just sitting there and slowly aging away. Now, I've witnessed this myself from colleagues who got into certain positions and did the traditional path. And I can see them aging because it comes at a cost. So we substitute our life for something. And it's important to note, what is it that we're substituting our life for? So every day we go to work, we do certain things. And a lot of times people are just happy that they're earning something from it. But you're substituting your life for that. And is it worth what you're getting out of it? And that's very important to just consider every now and then. So that we can flow freely, we must remove these blockages. Now, holistic anarchy for me is about applying these principles to all areas of my life. And I'll come to a point which I would like your participation in as well. The invisible wall exists in all areas of our lives. They are merely invisible. And a lot of times there are mental obstacles that we believe exist, and therefore, because we believe they exist, we can no longer progress further. Now, to remove this is up to each individual, whether they want to or not, and explore their own perspective on that. Though for me, I found, for example, through all the things that I did, that I had limitations that I had placed on myself. And this impacted other areas of my life as well. This is a video from the 1990s I just really wanted to include. And I think this video is very fascinating.
They want a world government system controlled by the two countries of the United States of America and the Soviet Union in conjunction with the European community, which is forming up.
It's from the 1990s, just keep that in mind.
Now, with all that information to hand, we're ready to go ahead and see what their plans are. Plan number one is to cancel cash as we know it today. And strangely enough, they have chosen my country, New Zealand, and Australia across the Tasman Sea as the first two countries to bring about this cashless society. And someone says, how do you know they're going to do it over there? Well, first of all, next month, in the month of July the 1st, they're getting rid of all trade barriers between Australia and New Zealand. That will give us closer economic relations, the similar thing to what you have with Canada. You have CER between the United States and Canada, and they're going to bring about a thing called CPR, which is closer political relations between our two countries. Now, they chose those two countries for a number of reasons. Number one is that New Zealand is the first in the world to start the money system every day. As I speak to you tonight, on the 10th, is it the 10th of June, 1990, in New Zealand, it is the 11th of June. They're a day ahead of us, you see. So everything that happens in the world starts in New Zealand, strangely enough. We get the sun every morning on Mount Hikurangi on the North Island of our country, and then the computers begin to roll, and they roll all around the world, so economically we are very important. There is only one country which beats us with the sun, and that is the island nation of Tonga, but they are not noted as being a world power in the field of economics. You'll agree with that. Now, and so we move on. We understand the first reason is that we start the computers every day. Number two, we are very slack people. By that I mean psychologically we're very laid back. If any Americans go down there, she got a shock, I think, with the laid back, easygoing attitude we have to life down there. No one worries about a thing. The key motto in New Zealand is this, listen to it, she'll be right. Okay? Which means everything's okay. The only difference between us and Australia is one word. They say, she'll be right, mate. It's the same thing. And we spend half our life in Australia and half in New Zealand, and so they're very, very similar in culture. You can hardly tell the difference. We can tell the difference in accent, but that's about all. And so then those two countries have been chosen. Number three reason is they are island nations. You can't get through the borders very easily to another country without going through the customs and immigration. You can't sneak across the border. You see, we've got sea all around us. Number four reason is we are very small populations. 3.5 million in New Zealand, 17 million in Australia, very easy to manipulate and very easy to play the fool with. If you read my book, Second Warning, and we have some books out on the stall tonight out there, we've got Warning, written in 1980, and in that book I predicted that that George Bush would become the next president. That's written in 1980 in my book Warning. And I've actually said that straight out, he will be the next president, and there were reasons I said that. Over here in 1984 I wrote Second Warning, and in there I've got a statement by a man called Professor Charles Birch of a group called the Club of Rome, and he said Australia would make an admirable test case. And now I've got a new book out, this one's been out 1,000. They want a world government system controlled by the two countries of the United States of America and the Soviet Union in conjunction with the European community, which is forming up by the year 1992. Now, with all that information to hand, we're ready to go ahead and see what their plans are. Plan number one is to cancel cash as we know it today. And strangely enough, they have chosen my country, New Zealand, and Australia across the Tasman Sea as the first two countries to bring about this cashless society. And someone says...
So that video is from 1990. Isn't that mind-blowing? That's a very long time ago this person was predicting that cashless society would be a thing. So I love putting this quote here because it's very relevant to many organizations, many events, many different initiatives that occur. It happened to cryptos, it happened to hip-hop, it happened to music house music. It's happened to so many different industries, which is that people forget the values that got them here in the first place. And when that happens, things change dramatically. So in Australia, people lost their values, what made that country be what it used to be. The ignorance led them down a path that was not very friendly. And then we've seen this happen with cryptos as well, where individuals participated in the early days would know that now it becomes very commercial and it's lost a lot of its original values. So for example, when I got into cryptos in 2013-14, it was about a very different thing to what it is today. It was beautiful. Everyone shared similar values about what was required and how it should be implemented. And obviously that's just part of life, things change. Though it's always good to remember the values that made something become powerful. The concept of holistic approach for me is about approaching topics and my individual life by looking at all areas of my life, not just a fragmented view. So what I mean by that, and it's something that I see a lot at anarchist events and many different liberty events, which is that individuals focus on one part. They seem to understand, okay, the banking industry is evil and we need to fix currency, but somehow they miss that other part of life, which is, hold on, if this is, corrupted, doesn't that mean we should also take into account education, pharmaceutical, government, other areas? But what I found super interesting is that people figured out the banking part, but then they're like, no, the pharmaceuticals are all good, even though, they're a massive industry, even though they paid one of the biggest fines in the world. How does that make sense? How did we figure out one piece of the puzzle, though the other piece did not fall into place? And I found that super interesting. I would go to anarchist events and people pulling out their iPhones and MacBook and using Windows. And I'm like, what's going on here? So you understand that anarchy applies to, for example, taxation is theft, though you didn't figure out the other parts. Why is that? Why do people, myself included at times, have a fragmented view on topics? That's a very interesting question for me. So for me, holistic approach when it comes to myself is about encompassing all areas that impact me. Not just one that impacts the financial aspect of my life, but I want to know my livelihood, my emotional state, my mental capacity, capabilities, my ability to be able to run, climb, jump. All these are important for me. Not just decentralization of money, but all of them. If I'm a true anarchist, I should target all areas of my life. That's at least my theory. Now, this is a video about a guy in Australia who wanted to do a challenge to eat beans and only beans for 40 days. I know it's a bit gross, but this is what he did. And I found the video quite interesting, though there was a part of it that I feel he left a very big clue. And maybe he didn't even realize it at the time, though for me that was very, very important, this clue.
I want to be uncomfortable. I'm spilling it. This is tin 191, the last time. I might even just walk a little. Last tin of the project. But how about that? 191 tins, 40 days, and the whole world of food awaits.
I can tell you one thing for certain. You don't have boundless energy when full of beans. That old saying's a myth. I had the thought that the grocery store represents the full spectrum of human emotions, and that by reducing what I buy from the store, I reduced my ability to feel those emotions. But Steinbeck was right. If you have 400 pounds of beans in the house, you have no fear of starvation. And maybe over time, beans would have given me my old self back. But for now, having consumed 81 kilograms of legumes, I was done. And with my amazing bean skin and bean hair and 4 bean teeth, I ran slowly but surely towards the finish line.
So that for me was very interesting. So he had consumed beans for 40 days, and he came out and said that other foods enable certain emotions and responses within him. So he felt very monotoned because of his diet. So he came to understand that perhaps eating different ingredients activate different emotions within him. And that's just his experience, and each person will have their own experience. What I found interesting is that, let's say if hypothetically that is true, and our diet is very monotone, so we're eating the same thing every day, or very common things every day, and then we suddenly shift to something that's all different types of vegetables, different colors, fruits, how will that impact our emotions? How will that impact our livelihood, our energy levels, our ability to connect with other people? Is there a connection between what we eat and the variance of it and our ability to be varied? I don't know, though I found it super interesting that his journey with a mono diet turned him into a mono person, and it deactivated other parts of his emotional response. This is a book that I found in Mexico when I was invited to create a DAO for this permaculture community. And the book was very fascinating. And when I was going through it, I noticed this part, which there used to be all these different types of apples. I didn't know that. In my store, it's just these two. But then I noticed that there used to be all these different ones. So this is what I call the illusion of choice. And this happens across many different areas of our lives. Do you want the Samsung? Do you want the iPhone? Do you want Microsoft, or do you want Macintosh? And we can expand this to so many different areas of our life, right? Do you want black tea, or do you want green tea? Pilsner or lager? You know, these exist in so many different areas of our lives. And it gives you the sensation that you're making a choice. Though choice is an illusion. This is from Matrix. I love this quote. Choice is an illusion, created those with power for those without. And I found that super interesting because I'm like, I thought I've been making decisions. I really thought I was choosing these things in my life. Though, how can you be choosing if you don't know the full array of your possible choices? So when you're looking at something holistically, you suddenly go, hold on, what are my actual choices? Is it just what's available in that store that I keep going back to? Are there other options available for me? That's perhaps a good place to start. Asking the question paves the path. But if we don't ask the question, then we'll never find any answers. So it's very important. I learned this from my brother. He said, you know, our mind is like a computer. All you got to do is just give it the right question. And then from there, it will start searching. And I tried that. And I found it super, super interesting. Because I wanted to know, hold on, what else is going on in our lives that has been sort of turned into this black and white notion? So we see all these information coming out, for example, from the World Economic Forum about how global warming is causing damage and we need to eat insects. That's the best solution they found, right? Eat insects. That sounds absurd to me. Is there a better solution? Is that the illusion of choice we've been given, which is, okay, these people are super smart apparently, and I'm sure they've done research, and the best conclusion they found for the European nation and then afterwards the rest of the world is insect protein? Really? This is the genius minds of our society. They came up with insect protein. Nothing else? Nothing else is on the table for us? So I found that super interesting because I had other information in my mind that conflicted with their notion of a more green future. My information told me that, hold on, we can grow vegetables, fruits in the desert. And if we can do it in the desert, that means we can do it anywhere. And is this provable? Of course it's provable. This is a photo. This is in Jordan, in the middle of the desert. You know, the soil is full of salt. It does not rain often at all. Jeff Lawton is a pioneer in permaculture. Now, if you don't know what permaculture is, that's fine. We can explore that.
Almost dead flat, completely salted landscape, 400 metres below sea level, the lowest place on earth, 2 kilometres from the Dead Sea, right, to about 2 kilometres where Jesus was christened. Hardly got any rainfall. We've got temperatures in August that go over 50 degrees. Everybody's farming under plastic strips. Everybody's spray. Everybody's putting synthetic fertiliser on. Overgrows with goats, just like maggots eating the flesh off the bone down to the bones of the country. Literally like maggots, giant maggots eating it to nothing. So we designed up a system that would harvest every single bit of rainwater that fell on it. On 10 acres, there's 1.5 kilometres of swale water harvesting ditch on contour, and when they're full, 1 million litres of water soak into the landscape, and they'll fill quite a few times over a winter. And then we heavily mulched those swales with organic matter, which was trash from organic fields nearby. We put that almost 1/2 metre deep, so we saved that and mulched our swales, which are about 2 metres wide and 1/2 metre deep on the trench. Then we put micro irrigation underneath the mulch. And then on the uphill side of the water harvesting trench, we put nitrogen fixing very hardy pioneer desert trees, which help shade and reduce wind evaporation, and also put nitrogen into the soil and structure the soil for us. And then on the lower side of the trench, we put fruit trees, majoring in date palms as the long-term overstory in the end. And then we put in figs, pomegranates, guavas, mulberries, now some citrus. Within 4 months we had figs a metre high with figs on, which is impossible. We've done a course, male and female course, trained up some locals, and we got a translator who's working for the project. He had his degree in agriculture in the Jordan University, and he got onto his mates and said in the agricultural department, well, you said we couldn't grow figs, we got figs growing and we got figs on them. You better come and test the soil, because no matter what you say, we're either growing in salty soil what we shouldn't be growing, or we've desalted the soil, and we'd like to know what we've done. They came in and the salt levels were dropping, so they became interested. The salt levels were dropping around the swales. They said, you must have washed it through. See, normally you put a huge amount of water on and wash the salt through to the lower levels, which just makes the groundwater more salty. In the end, you'll salt it 20 metres deep if you keep doing that, and then it will take 1,000 years to recover. And we use only 1/5 the amount of water. So the water, they thought we'd washed it all through. No, we'd used 1/5. That really got them when they realised how much water we hadn't used. With the same amount of water normally used on that much area, we could have done 50 acres. Originally, people laughed at us because we didn't put straight lines in. We went on contour with these swales. They thought, why don't you put, so you've got a bulldozer, you can flatten the desert, you can straighten it. So we want to go on contour because we've got a longer edge and we harvest the water passively. Then we planted more non-fruiting trees than we did fruit trees, so they laughed at us. Because we were planting unproductive things, more than productive things. What's the point, you know? In soil that won't even grow anything, so, you know. And then we covered all the inside of the swale with a huge amount of mulch, where they scrape all their organic matter off and burn it, like most traditional agriculture. In the middle of winter, we got a funny email saying, we've got a problem. We've got mushrooms growing in the swale. Well, they called it fungus, but when we saw a photograph of it, it was mushrooms, because they'd never seen mushrooms, because they never had that much humidity in living history in the soil. And when you open up the mulch, there's all these little animals there, you know, there's little insects, and the soil has come alive. And the fungi net that's underneath the mulch is putting off a waxy substance, which is repelling the salt away from the area. And the decomposition is locking the salt up. And the salt is not gone, it's become inert and insoluble. So we could regreen the Middle East, we could regreen any desert, and we could desalt it at the same time. And if we can do it on an insignificant, flat, little bit of 10 acres of flat desert, if you give us something with catchment, or a wadi, or a canyon, or any of those erosion gullies, we can turn it right around completely. You can fix all the world's problems in a garden. You can solve them all in a garden. You can solve all your pollution problems and all your supply line needs in a garden.
So that's fascinating for me. This person did this in Jordan. No water, absolutely terrible soil. So that's what holistic anarchy is for me. It's really finding out the key components of all areas of my life. Not just the financial aspect, not just the crypto part, but my food, my conversations. What am I reading? Who am I with? Where am I? And this shows me that this can happen anywhere. And if this person did it in the desert, why isn't this a topic being discussed? So then it makes me think, so the same thing that happened with cryptos is happening in other areas of life, which is that it's not a lack of solution. It's just the people that are dominating those fields have a very different notion of what's going on. And that for me is interesting. So then I start to question, where else is this happening? Is it just in terms of agriculture versus permaculture? Is it just finance? Is it in the pharmaceuticals? Is it in education? Where else am I being fooled to participate in this paradigm referred to as the illusion of choice? That was very fascinating for me. So the fragmentation of the mind occurs quite often in society, which is that people go through a particular field or training and their mind becomes fragmented. So therefore, you're unable to see the problem as a whole and you see parts of it. So for example, when we're dealing with cryptos, people believe that perhaps via cryptos, their lives will be changed, that society will change. And while money is a very big component of that change, there are other pieces of the puzzle, in my opinion, that are missing. And that's been my pursuitment. So that's kind of become my mind, you know, going through Alice in Wonderland kind of a scenario, trying to find out what's going on, who's where, who's hiding the clues, all these mazes everywhere. Though the answers, once you find them, are very simple. Like what he described was very simple, right? Compare that to the concept of agriculture, plastic, spraying, building all this stuff, putting the soil through this to get rid of the soil, like it's amount of water they use. It's absolutely crazy. His solution was what? Dig a trench, put some trees in the right order, let nature do its thing. Very low budget. So why isn't that being proposed by the World Economic Forum and the European Union and other people within our societies? Why isn't such a simple thing being proposed, yet eating insects is on top of the list? It's interesting. Almost makes me think of central bank digital currencies, maybe. So just as a side story, last night I was trying to mess with the TV and I just wanted to turn down the brightness. It was late at night. So I grabbed the TV remote, I go into the menu and I'm like, okay. And it's just like movie mode, standard mode. And I'm like, all right, well, can I just turn down the brightness? Then it's like expert mode. And I'm like, really? Turning down the brightness and contrast is expert mode? That's crazy. Where is society going? Where turning down the brightness and contrast has become expert mode. That's scary. Do you want to enter the expert mode? I'm like, damn. But that's what's happening. It's almost like that movie. I don't know if you've seen it, Idiocracy. Very fascinating movie to watch, even more relevant today, you know? The normalization of not being able to look at things and think for themselves. We're almost entering an era where people think, oh, I don't have a degree in that, so I can't have an opinion. Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know you had to have a degree and wear a suit to have an opinion. It's from a Bliss and Esso song. But that's just what's happening. People have been made to feel as though they can't talk about things unless they have a degree in it or unless they're an expert. Apparently, I was an expert TV user, but being able to change the brightness. I'm not. It's just a TV. It's just brightness. But that's the way it happens. So then I started applying these notions of transparency and open source, and I'm like, hold on. If I like open source and I like transparency, am I applying this to other areas of my life? Am I looking up ingredients? Like, how many people in this room appreciate open source? Please put your hand up. Almost every single person. Now my question to you is, and it's not personal if it's not, it's just something to think about. Do you also apply the principles of open source to what you consume? Do you check the ingredients of the food you eat? And if not, why don't you? Why is that conflict exists within our lives sometimes, where we're so fond of open source? So what is open source? Open source for me is the ability to know what's inside a software. At least have the ability to check, if you can. So then I noticed there's people that love that, but then they will eat whatever is in front of them. They won't even ask, hey, what's in this? Just a simple question. What is in this? What ingredients did you put in this? So then if you don't do that, are you supporting proprietary food? Are you supporting spyware food that you don't know what it's going to do to you? So then why is that? How did we figure out the first piece of the puzzle, which is I like open source when it comes to software, but when it comes down to our well-being, suddenly I'm cool with proprietary? That's what I call the fragmentation of the mind. That's why it's important to be holistic. Now, I find that super fascinating. So if I was to apply it then, does that mean if I choose the wrong words to speak and write, am I poorly coding my life? Now, if you're a poor coder, or if you have an application that is poorly written, what happens? You have bugs. It can have glitches. You have issues. It crashes. It might not even function properly. You might even do all this stuff on it, and suddenly, boom, it disappears because there was a bug in it. So why aren't we doing that with our words? What happens if we choose the wrong words? And we code our life in the wrong way. And then we have bugs. We have issues, right? What happens with our food? So we know we as a biological species, we can be hijacked, right? There's parasites that take over an ant and mechanically like take over it and make it climb a tree and where they want it to be, the parasite, and then it sprouts and, distributes its pores and then captures other ants again. I'm sure you've seen videos on this. So if biologically we can be hacked and we're not paying attention to proprietary food and proprietary conversations, and we are inviting spywares into our lives through food, through our diet, through our conversations, through our interactions, is that something we should consider looking into? I believe so. Because if you apply it in one area and you're not applying it in other areas, the question is why? Why is transparency only important when it comes to code? Now, the other part I want to talk about is the concept I learned from some random person I met in Vietnam. He was a very intelligent businessman. And he goes, let me teach you something randomly. He goes, do you understand the concept of incense tree? I'm like, yeah, it's weird, He goes, okay, cool. Yeah, of course, it's weird. And for those that don't know, it's like when you have a relation with a family member. So, if you marry your sister or have a kid, sort of thing like that. Now, what he wanted to teach me was, what if you apply that to business and relationships? He said, do you notice often businesses become stagnant because they invite the same kind of people to work with them that feels familiar? But this is very dangerous because then you no longer have new ideas. No one is challenging you because you created an echo chamber. Let's say you're a crypto enthusiast and you're like speaking to someone and they don't like cryptos. You're like, nah, I don't want to be around that person. But maybe that person is exactly the person you need to help you understand how to make your project or make your product or business better, because now you're inviting a new perspective. So he taught me to look at business holistically as well, which is not to surround myself just with people that are similar, but actually invite individuals that will challenge my notions. That's very healthy. Now, back onto a different tangent. I started looking at other things, and I became super interested in this notion of blue zones. There was a person who did some studies and found out that in particular regions around the world, people lived especially longer than compared to other regions. And he wanted to find out why this was happening. So in one particular aspect, he was looking at Sardinia, where there was a large number of people who lived in, let's say, 100 years plus. So centurions, I think they call them. And they figured out some things. For example, contribution to that, they guessed, was the steepness, because where they lived was very mountainous areas. So these people in their 90s, 100 years old, every day they're going up the hill, down the hill, up the hill. Other things was control of stress. They were just living a very relaxed life. Care for elders. The elders were among the young. And a healthy diet. And the guy was thinking, oh, they're eating really healthy stuff. But it was just like pasta, fruit, vegetables, simple stuff. It wasn't something like, organic from the market every day sort of thing. But what I found super interesting about this is that this is an inversion of what's happening in Australia. And I'm sure you can relate depending on where you are. Where in Australia, as soon as someone gets old, you move to a single-story house, right? You're like, no more stairs, you're getting old. It's not good for your knees. But hold on, these people are living over 100 years, and every day they're walking. None of them had a walking stick even. Maybe one did or something, but none of them really, from what I saw, had it. So why in Australia then, and the US and Canada, are the old people stopping climbing? No, it's bad for my knee. The doctor said it's bad for my knee. But what's going on? The other thing I found super interesting is care for elders. In Australia, as soon as people get old, they go into a nursing home. Absolute detachment from family, from the young generation. I found that super interesting too, whereas here they were celebrated. There was the young generation, the mother, and then the grandmother. And that seemed more natural to me. I'm like, okay, so you're meant to be in one ecosystem. Because you're copying, it's the blueprint, right? You don't want to disconnect the younger generation from the old. Whereas in Australia, it's like, they're just old, don't worry about them, they're just saying nonsense. But that's how wisdom was passed down. So I found that really interesting because it opposed the notion that is happening in Australia and a lot of Western countries. So I came to this point, which I found really powerful. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. So I found this more and more relevant the more I got involved with various communities around the world. I realized there's a lot of people who think they know shit, but maybe they don't. And that I found more dangerous than the person who is ignorant. Because when you have a person who assumes that they have the absolute truth of what is happening, and they base their life on that ideology, that's a dangerous person for me. Because there's no room for error. Now, everything I put here, I'm open to be challenged on. I haven't invested my life in this. It's just so far that's what I've gotten up to. But for me, it's interesting when I meet people. Like 4 years ago, I was in Rotterdam in Netherlands. And there was a guy who was doing a presentation on Ethereum. And he's like, no other coins will exist. Only Ethereum will exist in the future. And I go, wow, whoa, it's a big call. You must have like one of those glass balls or something, but not a very good one. So I asked him, I go, how can you say that? How can you say no other project apart from Ethereum will exist? I go, do you think that's healthy to think like that? And he thought about it and he's like, yeah, nothing else will exist. I'm like, okay. Obviously that didn't turn out to be true. Though it is an example of this, because often we have people who really with certainty say things. And I have been humbled so many times to realize maybe I don't know shit. And I think that's healthy. I think it's okay to leave 10%. Like dedicate yourself 80, 90%, just leave 10, 20% space for maybe all of that is false. I think that's healthy because otherwise it will surprise you. Now, I learned this from a very good friend of mine in the Netherlands, and it has stayed with me since he said it probably 8 years ago, and even more so nowadays. He said, never let your arrogance lead you towards ignorance. Don't become so sure of your thoughts and your opinions that you suddenly close your mind to new ideas and perhaps the possibility of being wrong. And I really enjoyed having that in the back of my mind all these years, because it proves to be true. How many times I've thought I've known something, and then I was like, no, I was wrong. And that's nice, because then you learn something new. Now, in the Buddhist culture, in Tibetan Buddhist culture, I believe so, there was a documentary, and they were out in the mountains, and as a part of their practice, one person would sit and they would give their opinion. The other person would stand in front of them and they would debate that state of mind or that ideology. And that teaches them to not hold on to an idea, to not identify with it to the point where you will crumble if that turns out to be false, which is let it be fluid, right? I'm not going to quote Bruce Lee, but be like water, sort of. And that for me was very interesting, because it teaches you that to keep an open mind. Now, that can be hijacked too. I don't mean keeping an open mind to the point where you'll just fall for whatever thoughts come up. You know, you have to have a sense of understanding of yourself, your moral values, your principles, and what adheres to that. And based on that, you can kind of feel what's happening. You don't necessarily need to participate in it. I mean, we can see right now, 4 years later, and still weird things are going on. This video for me is very important because it kind of encapsulates a lot of the ideas that I have in a very beautiful way, and in a way that I personally don't believe I can match. It's about understanding what is your right as a person and what is the best way to impact society. And I believe the answer always comes back to us rather than anything else. So I'll just quickly play this.
We have a problem then. We have a problem that to really, really be independent, to really be an individual, which in psychological terms is called individuation, that's difficult for most people. It's kind of tough. It requires work. It requires, you know, to think and act in moral ways, and oh, that's just too much trouble. I wish it was a halfway, you know, stage. So the media goes, well, there is. We'll sell you the fashion of independence. You can buy into this. You can be a goth, a punk, you know, you can be straight, you can be gay, you can be macho. We'll sell you all sorts of images to decorate your inauthentic life. And that will pacify you, because there is a voice that's kind of screaming inside of you that you're not living an authentic life. We know that. We know that's a tough voice to live with. But you also can't really do anything about it because, you know, you're lazy and you're weak. And you realize what you would have to sacrifice or lose if you really took the true moral way. The way of selfhood and the way of finding out who and what you are. We know that's difficult for you. So what we'll do is we'll manifest a bunch of simulacras. We have a whole industry creating false personas. But if you buy into that, and it's very easy to do that, I mean, it's just a matter of going down to the hairdresser and coloring your hair pink and wearing a couple of earrings and getting a few tattoos and, you know, having a big t-shirt with Anarchy written on it. But you're the last person who even understands what true freedom and anarchy is. But don't worry about that. You know, well, the world is full of those kinds of people, isn't it? But do you see it being any more free? If that was ever going to solve the world's problems, what happened in the 1960s when everybody was free, quote unquote? Where's the love now? Did it stop wars? Did it stop evil men ruling the world? Did it stop genocide? Did it stop the mutilation of animals and abattoirs? Tell me what one thing that the hippie movement or the punk movement of the 1970s achieved. Well, I'll tell you what they achieved. The leaders of the punk movement are living like pashas and maharajas in $1-million houses over there in Bel Air and also in Los Angeles. You know, Billy Idol has a fleet of Harley Davidsons. That's what happened, you know, that's what happened. But they're wearing a hammer and sickle. We're for the people, peace and love, CND, all that shit, you know, utter nonsense, utter nonsense. Maybe the man from within who's completely incognito, who's working within the system, you know, suit and tie, you know, would never even pass them by on the street. Maybe those people will do more damage to the evil status quo than all those hordes screaming for reform, you know. Because it's not just a mass of people label reading, running away into these inauthentic models. It's a small group of educated people, dedicated, passionate, absolutely zero tolerance for the lie, who are from all walks of life, who have spiritually, most importantly, that they are spiritually adept, that they understand what knowledge is. They have reverence for knowledge. They're not just trying to gain knowledge. Any idiot can do that. Gaining knowledge, well, God, the schools are full of it. No. It's a matter of loving knowledge. That's a big difference. Loving knowledge, understanding what knowledge is a whole different thing than gaining knowledge. So there's these fine lines in all of this, very fine lines. And if the knowledge has to be empowering and changing you first, how can you do anything to change another world? Or maybe you don't even have the right. Maybe we're on the complete wrong subject matter altogether. How does anyone even think that they have a right to involve themselves in the life or the lifestyle of anyone else? If you really think about that, you'll find it's pretty preposterous. But at the same time, you do have the right to fix your own life. That, at least we know, is an absolute. You have the absolute right to work on your life. You have the right to make any of the choices that you want to make. So then my work sort of really focuses on that and doesn't stray from that. If it is true that the Illuminati, the child molesting priests, the Templars, and all of these people, what would we think if it is proven or found out that each and every one of these people has the perfect right to do what they are doing? And that you, in fact, have really no right to tell them or anyone else what to do? What happens if that turns out to be the spiritual law? And that the only thing that you have the right to do is to change your own life, regardless of what anybody else is doing. Well, then we have a problem, because the whole world is running around doing exactly the opposite. Everyone's running around fixing all of these other people and waving placards and getting reforms and getting to change this and do that, or we'll lock you up, and society will go through these cycles in which you have a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, a little bit of dark, a little bit of light. And yet the real work is about you taking care of your own house, your own garden. And if everybody did that, unseen forces would come to aid. Man would, like Vernon Howard said, we can accept that God can become man to save man, but we can't accept that man can become God to save himself. It's one of the most powerful statements I've ever heard. And so what is that dependency in human beings that makes them refute that? Of course, we know that everyone listening to the sound of my voice is going to refute that. No, it's Jesus who's meant to do it. Muhammad, Allah, what are you talking? Oh, that's all that humanist stuff. Man being his own God. Oh, satanic evil. So we already know that, that's not a common held theory. But wait a minute. What then is the motive that makes people refute that statement? Before we get into what they're into, you're a Christian. Why would you feel motivated to not accept that man is his own savior? I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in as to why you, not the cult, not the clan, not your guru, why you would, have a problem with that. What's in your psychology that has made you, in the 20 years of your life, or the 25 years of your life, or the 40 years of your life, not have enough brain cells to realize, my God, that's the bottom line? Because in my opinion, if you don't accept that, you are an insane person. You're not insane, you're unsane. You're toxic, and you need to be quarantined or something. That's really the long and short of it, in my opinion. Then I want to get the crucifix out. As soon as I hear that somebody is, thinking that another authority, another person, has the rights over their mental and emotional and attitudinal and psychic life, I'm worried about that person, because I know that person has got some very serious psychological and existential problems right off the bat. Right off the bat.
So that talk for me is very powerful because it turns the table around, and suddenly you're confronted by your own image rather than, oh, let's focus on Russia, let's focus on the US, let's focus on China, let's focus on Australia. If only Putin was eradicated, life would be better. No. If only Trump was removed, then it would be great. No. Maybe if China was no longer communist, then my life would be free. That's what's happening on a large scale. And for me, the most powerful part is, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing for myself to free myself, to make myself happier, stronger, more resilient? Bitcoin is anti-fragile, meaning that the more you try and break it, the stronger it gets. Are we anti-fragile? to some level, depending on who. I believe so. Because the more we experience in life, the stronger we become. The better choices we make, the more mistakes we make. That's just part of it. So all of these encompass my life journey in many different ways. And it's been challenging. None of this is easy. It's definitely not easy. It's much easier to just not pay attention to these things, right? And just be waiting for life to do its thing to magically create liberty for us. Though, for me, that's not really the answer. And it's been very challenging to confront all these areas of my life. This isn't easy, though it's dangerous to be ignorant now. I mean, it's becoming very clear. Maybe in the past, it was okay to coexist with society. My experience is that as of 2-3 years ago, it's become dangerous to be ignorant because society has created this split in the path, which is, for me anyway, either you want to know and you want to implement and you want to grow, otherwise you are taken and what I call harvested. And that's not really a good position to be in. Now, I want to go back to the concept of decentralized education, because these are all the topics that I don't see being taught at universities and traditional educational institutions. Whereas these are very powerful concepts that can ultimately impact your life in a positive way and allow us to transcend where we are. And all of it has to start with us. Now, if we perhaps give people the choices, so remember at the start I said people believe they are making a decision or they have chosen a particular thing, though it's an illusion of choice. So unless we know what choices are available, we won't be able to know which direction and what paths are available to us. Now, centralized education, for me, has created fragmented individuals. It's very hard to speak to people sometimes because they just want to focus on the area that they know. Of course, it's a safe space. It's what they have trained. Though if we perhaps learn other things, we can have different opinions on very different topics. And it doesn't have to be always right, but just having an opinion is important when it comes to things that impact humanity. For example, in the last 2-3 years, a lot of people felt ashamed or they felt guilty to express their truths. And that's not cool. In Australia, sometimes I had to hide in a store just to speak to someone about a topic. That's not really okay. People got cancelled on so many different platforms for saying things, regardless of their background. That's not okay. If you don't like something, the only choice you have is to walk away. There are many talks at this event. It doesn't mean I agree with every single person, but imagine if I didn't and I go and tell the organizers, hey, can you not let this person come? I don't like what they're saying. It doesn't match my ideology and I find it dangerous. It's like, well, there's the door. Just go outside. It's that simple. Though that doesn't exist in our society anymore because things are being cancelled. And there's a fear element. And now it's almost weird to be into privacy, for example. It's like, are you a criminal? Like, no, just like privacy. So this normalization of these negative elements is becoming more prevalent. So the concept of utopia in a different way is to build it bottom up, to do to education what Bitcoin did to finance. It's a big task. It's not a small task. The education industry has been around for a very long time. It's not a small industry to challenge, though we have been quite successful. And last year, personally, I partnered up with a university out of Switzerland, and we did a course on DAOs, where we created a DAO, the students participated in it, voted on it, and we incentivized the learning process, which is part of Utopia. For example, those that participated in the conversations, in the dialogue, and showed that they were learning, they were financially incentivized. So, I sent them Bitcoin when they gave the right answer or they helped another student. Now, that was fascinating for me. Suddenly you have an incentivized model for student participation. I know I would have paid a lot more attention in university if I was being paid for it. Now, you can do other things too, which is why don't the tuition that come through, so the course tuition itself, go into a treasury, then the top students become stakeholders of that treasury as well, along with the mentor and the oracles. Why not create a pathway where students that learn a particular course can go and create businesses rather than go become a junior for some company? Why not incentivize entrepreneurship, which is a great step towards liberty? So these were all the things that we're kind of considering. So we won a grant from the Swarm Foundation, and we're building a decentralized model using their storage protocol. That was fascinating. And we're implementing a lot of other things that are quite exciting. As I said, it's a big project. It takes time. This quote for me is something that always rings in my head, sort of like the church bell. Ding. And the reason it does is because it's a very important question that a very good friend of mine instilled in my mind. And that was, and then what? And I'll explain what that means. So you see people that are like, okay, I'm going to go to the Hackers Congress. Okay, and then what? What are you going to do with it? I'm going to move to Europe. Okay, and then what? His question always came at the right time, which is people need to really think about what's the next step? What are you doing with that? So you came to the Hackers Congress. Well done. You got access to all this knowledge. Amazing. I'm grateful. And then what? What are you going to do with it? And if people ask that question more often, perhaps they would be able to see their lives in a way which is more holistic, which is, okay, if I have a girlfriend and then I'll be happy. Okay, you have your girlfriend, you'll be happy, and then what? What are you going to do with it? And then I'm going to move to LA and we're going to travel the world. Cool. And then what? And if you really put depth into that thought, you can kind of go, okay, maybe that's not as exciting as I thought, you know? Maybe that doesn't lead down the path that I thought it would. And maybe I was just so focused on that first part and gaining happiness through that first part that I didn't really look at the whole thing. And that really helped me because I really sat down. I'm like, okay, create Bitopia. And then what? And then education is decentralized. Cool. And then what? You know? Where am I going with this? What is my intention? At what point do I reach a conclusion in that, and then what? So if there's anything I want to leave with you today, apart from all the little rabbit holes we kind of like went through, it's just this simple quote. And if you can apply that to other areas of your life, fantastic. And just ask that question, and then what? So this is my 9th year of speaking here, and I've watched a lot of changes take place. Different crowds come, similar people come, and it's been very interesting for me. And things transform. They're not always, or hopefully they're not always stagnant. And it's been a pleasure to watch the changes, and sometimes not. And that's just part of life. And it's sad. It's just how it is. And I wonder where else our journey will take us. Where will we be next year? And how will this all progress? Where will I be? What new challenges will I undertake? Or yourselves? What I can tell you is that I've been at this event 9 years, and many other events, Anarchy in Mexico, and a lot of different freedom and liberty events. And sometimes you get let down. As I said, you know, you go to an anarchist event and people are working on their iPhones and Windows, and you're like, well, maybe we could improve that. But what I can say is that ultimately the most powerful thing I have done is focus on myself and to take all that knowledge and energy and just really be with myself. I don't care about Russia. I don't care about the US. I don't care about China. I care about how much work I need to do on myself. And it's a lot of work. It's a crazy world. It creates a lot of work for you. And I've done parts of it, and it's taken a lot of energy, and I hope to continue. And that's the only solution I have found that is worthy of my energy. Whereas everything else seems to be a distraction. Out of all these years, the greatest thing I want right now, and it sounds simple, is a piece of land, grow some trees at my own place, and that's it. And then what? That's it. There is no and then what. And that's, I think, the complexity of life to make you feel like you need all these things. You need to be involved in the politics and conversations and this fight and that fight and help this person and help that person. Excuse me. And perhaps if we focus that on ourselves, we would have a better result. Maybe it's worked somewhat for myself. It's challenging. Anyway, thanks for listening to my story. It's been a pleasure sharing yet another one with you. And thank you for your time. Cheers.
Great, great talk. Maybe we have some questions. I know I do have one question about education. Recently I learned that Neuralink got approval to start implanting chips in humans with a spinal cord injury. And eventually it will lead to people being able to interact with basically computers with their mind. So if you have a classroom full of kids and one of them or a few of them have this microchip in their head, what do we teach them? How do we go forward when they have all the knowledge in their brain, basically? Yeah. What to teach them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Maybe?
That's a good question. For me, that's not a path that I'm interested in. So Neuralink and all of these things are, it's going to happen and I have no control over that. It's not something I participate in. Now that's not to say in the future maybe Bitopia won't, be able to integrate such a thing. Though for me, Bitopia isn't about the knowledge that Elon Musk is seeking. Bitopia isn't about taking what's already available on traditional educational senses and utilizing that. It's about giving people access to all these things that I put up that you will never see Elon Musk mention or any university really discuss. So while that may happen, there's a lot of people that are fully against that path, who really want that access to knowledge that can transform their lives. And that's where my focus is.
Yeah, I get it. Great. I mean, permaculture, it's super important. And also, feeding your carbon-based structure with the good food is very essential. So any more questions in the audience? Anyone? No?
Cool.
All right. Then a big round of applause.
Thanks.
Please. Thank you.